I'd rather have, punk musicians signed with a record label than an independent commentary guy signed with the Russian Federation to do fucking propaganda.
Hey, everyone.
Anyway, let's move on to some greener pastures here, and let's talk about Anthony Fantano shitting on Tim Pool.
Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you're doing well. It seems once again we have to come onto this channel and address a right-wing freak pretending to be a fan of music and art, or at least visibly struggling on their shitty YouTube channel and podcast to sort of like rationalize maybe the person they once were or the heart that maybe they have on some level, not really being copacetic with the psychotic, bigoted views they now have to hold for a job. Of course, I am talking about the one and only Tim Pool.
Bald on ball violence, by the way.
AKA Beanie Man. You know, if you've had the displeasure of seeing any amount of content from Tim's YouTube channel, you know that like a lot of other weird right-wing talking heads on the internet, he makes a lot of money and gets a lot of attention by virtue of commenting on with a lot of indignance, a lot of pop culture items that are either nominally or deeply offensive to those with right-wing views because, oh, it's woke or it's blasphemous or whatever. Enter in singer-songwriter Laura Jane Grace of Against Me fame, modern punk rock legend, many would claim, who recently did a little performance at a Bernie Sanders rally of like this silly-ass acoustic sing-along song about essentially, as a trans person, feeling fucked by God, which, if you have two brain cells to rub together, even if you haven't personally experienced what Laura Jane Grace is, obviously describing in this song, you sort of like get the concept pretty easily that I am a trans woman. Personally, I feel kind of under fire socially with all of this hate being lobbed towards trans people, all of this bigotry. A lot of that bigotry tends to kind of skew as being very religious, or at least it's coded as such, hence the metaphor where she's feeling fucked by God. Now, apparently this performance may have gotten a little viral online in right-wing circles, made some people pissed off. Tim Pool goes on his show and says people are angry and pissed off and raging about things all the time just to have something to talk about on YouTube. So of course that's kind of like the lead into this whole reason for him talking about Laura Jane Grace in this video here.
A transgender singer is sexually graphic in front of a crowd of people, which I presume largely is adults, but it's a Bernie rally, so there's probably some kids there. Totally inappropriate.
If this were any other Tim Pool segment, and in many ways it is, there really wouldn't be much reason for me to talk about it, except for the fact that I find it hilarious that Tim spends a great deal of this video trying to validate his criticisms and basically provide some weight to his point of view here because he used to be a massive Against Me fan.
I am an OG fan. OG, of course, for those that don't know, means original gangster.
He even tries to impress
No. I'm an OG fan. Original gangster. Oh my God.
The viewers of the video that Tim really knows what he's talking about and knows where he's coming from here because he used to know how to play all the songs on guitar.
You had the classic song, Baby, I'm an Anarchist, for which I can still play on the guitar. And then, of course, you had much better songs, in my opinion, like Pints of Guinness Make You Strong.
In fact, it's kind of funny because as he progressively talks about Laura Jane Grace and this song and like how big of a fan he once was, it seems like the number of Against Me songs he knows how to play on guitar like increases. First it was a bunch of songs, then it was like the Axl Rose songs, and then like, he's listing other tracks too. He just knows the whole damn Against Me catalog.
And they have a song called Tonight We're Gonna Give It 35%. And that is, I can't remember which album it's off of, but I used to play it all the time. I'm pretty sure I can still play, so it's only 4 chords anyway. And it's about signing a record deal. What? We're gonna get signed to a major record deal and get $1 million? Let's go! And that's when I was like, hypocrites.
He even goes on to play a lick from an Against Me intro.
I can prove it. Here we go. Okay. Anybody who knows knows what that song is, you know exactly what song I was playing.
And I just find this very funny because like the time period that Tim describes in this video as far as like being into Against Me and how their music resonated with him at the time when they were originally hot with Axl Rose and so on and so forth. I was a big fan of the band at that same time. In fact, like I saw the band live way back then, and I had all the EPs on vinyl and liked some of the stuff they did on Fat Records not too long after that. And Tim is just like obsessed in this video with like proving how like hardcore of a fan he was, how deeply ingrained into like the Against Me sphere he was. He even goes on to sort of like brag like, oh yeah, you know, like I know people who knew or know Laura Jane Grace. You know, I don't know them personally. I don't got any beef, but like, you know, I know people who know people. And Tim like basically says all of this to build up to his argument that in his opinion, now he states this.
Also, saying you're hypocritical for signing with a record label is so funny. It's like, what the fuck are musicians supposed to do? Die? It's their job, dude. It's the dream of like every musician. I'd rather have, you know, punk musicians sign with a record label than an independent commentary guy signed with the Russian Federation to do fucking propaganda. Like, one is directly impacting your output. It's additionally crazy. He's like, yeah, they should have been not fake like me and gotten money from Russia to say Ukraine is the enemy of mankind.
As fact, but then he also sort of like backpedals a bit. He's like, oh, I'm just saying, I'm just asking some questions. He goes on to argue that he feels that Laura Jane Grace is essentially just like pretending to be trans or transed herself for money and attention, and was entirely motivated by the fact that like Against Me was in a ton of debt and just needed money.
I would say that the honest take here, lead singer of Against Me, was in the gutter. The band was not doing really well. They had massive amounts of debt. They failed. And then I got an idea, trans. And then all of a sudden they saw a big bump.
Now, if you're an actual Against Me fan, you know how bullshit that argument is, because when you dig into the band's back catalog, like tracks as early as Disco Before the Breakdown do very much convey like a closeted queer experience point of view of some sort. So like that alone would instantly delegitimize any argument.
Fantano's such a fucking music nerd. It's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, that in and of itself probably shows that. Sure. But you know what else also shows that? The fact that that has never happened. No one has been like, oh, I'm going to trans myself for clout. It's so not a real thing that the only people that have done something similar to that are people like Steven Crowder and other Republican charlatans who can't find any person like transing themselves for clout, so they have to become the example. Why the fuck would anyone undergo the process of HRT for fucking clout? Like, there's way easier ways of gaining prominence and money than becoming persona non grata automatically, public enemy number one automatically, becoming a part of the 1% of the less than 1% of the fucking population that is straight up vilified every step of the fucking way for you know, living their goddamn truth. It makes no sense. There are so many hurdles beyond the structural hurdles of hormone replacement therapy. There are so many societal hurdles in your way that it is virtually impossible for someone to trans themselves for clout. Okay? And it's ironic because there used to be a very similar argument against gay people before trans people got into the crosshairs, when the point of contention was around like gay rights, right? Even though it was always LGBT, right? This was the argument that Republicans presented. They would say, oh, gay people, they're just doing it for fucking clout. What clout? Are you going to go suck a dick for clout? Like, oh, gay people are just gay for attention. I don't see you taking it up the butt or putting it in a man's butt for fucking attention. The fuck are you talking about? People do it because they love it, okay? It's that simple. I don't get it. I don't understand it. You literally couldn't be more wrong. Okay, that's the example that I'm using, which is Josh Sider or Steven Crowder are the only fucking people that actually trans themselves for clout. And they do it to prove the point that you can trans yourself for clout. But the very act of them transing themselves for clout unironically undermines the argument that they're making, which is that there are people that are doing this out there, but we couldn't find them, so we became the example. Then I guess you don't have an example. It's the same principle behind Ben Shapiro at the fucking failing Daily Wire, which we're going to be talking about in a second, looking for a documentary piece on men who claim to be women to beat people in athletic competitions, in specifically basketball or any sport, okay? Daily Wire, they tried to do this. And if you recall, as I do, there's video evidence for this. They talk about it openly. They couldn't find a single example in the real world of someone even coming near the I'm faking it for athletic competitions. Like, they couldn't find a real example of this to make a documentary around it. So they ended up making a work of fiction. The Daily Wire movie on men playing women's basketball, that one was supposed to be a documentary. And they couldn't. Lady Ballers was supposed to be initially a documentary. They couldn't fucking find someone to do it. They couldn't even pay someone to do it. So they made a fictional movie about it. Now, in the process of trying to do this investigation, at a certain point, if you're an honest person, you realize, oh my God, we can't even pay someone to trans themselves. It kind of feels like this is not a real thing. And you just, at that point, you're supposed to stop. You're supposed to cease your investigations and perhaps make a documentary about how this is not a real problem. But because these people are not honest actors, because these people are simply invested in doing propaganda against 1% of the fucking population that's hurting no one, they double down by making a work of fiction. Anyway, I just get so annoyed when people make the same exact dumbass propaganda that gay people used to face in like the 90s and shit about how they're faking it for attention. But now but now they're doing it with trans people, which is even crazier than faking it for attention for gay people. Like, you're also simultaneously, like, you're like, you can just turn around and be like, I'm gay, okay? Even though no one is fucking faking it, obviously, for attention. You get no additional benefits on that part. But like, for faking being trans, like, there's a lot of work that goes into it, you know? And there's a fuck ton, just like faking being gay in the 90s would not give you any fucking societal advantages, and instead would unironically destroy your fucking life in a completely homophobic society. Faking being trans right now is just like putting you in the crosshairs of some of the worst people on the planet for no fucking reason. Who would do that? Who would do that for no reason?
That Laura Jane Grace coming out of the closet was like entirely fabricated and so on and so forth. But what's hilarious about this is that Tim is apparently such a fan, he's actually aware of this song, references it in his rant, and sort of like poo-poos the idea of that by saying this song must just be about either being gay or being about dating someone who's really fat and ugly.
The disc before the breakdown, where you're like, hey, it sounds like this dude's gay. No, I mean like literally, because like either he's dating someone who's ugly or fat, or he's singing about being gay, because it has the lyrics, I know they're going to laugh at us when they see us out together holding hands like this. They wouldn't understand it if we told them all the reasons. Pause.
You can't make this up. The guy is such a mealy-mouthed piece of shit. And look, I'll be honest, it's been a long time since I have like really truly loved a new album from Against Me. I haven't really dug much the band has done since like searching for a former clarity. And a lot of my reasoning comes down to the band mostly like adopting a more mainstream rock sound over the years. The idea that Against Me and Laura Jane Grace are like completely beyond listenability and fandom and respectability at this point because like they're just the biggest sellouts in rock and punk history is like complete bullshit. Like even the band's most mainstream sounding albums in their catalog don't even come close to sounding like radio rock or even like traditional commercial pop punk for that matter. In fact, I don't even think Laura or Against Me
and I hope he mentions this, Tim Pool's music
could even make that sort of if they really wanted to. So the degree to which they can really even sell out on that front, I feel like is not even a reality. You may disagree with that personal assessment that I have. Certainly the opposite is arguable. However, I feel like the last person on the planet who should be making that argument is Tim fucking Pool. Because if Tim is going by the metric that Laura Jane Grace was at one time, like a really great underground hardcore singer-songwriter with anarchist leanings, and now she's like no longer fully that, and as a result she's a loser and a cretin and she shouldn't be taken seriously. Okay, if that is true of Laura Jane Grace, that applies 8, 10, 20 times for Tim fucking Pool, who apparently over here again is sitting here like a stan. I play all the songs on the guitar. Oh. So like how deep into the ideological tank were you for every old school Against Me song? Probably more than even Laura Jane Grace was, and she wrote the fucking tracks. Like in the grander scheme of things, the ideological shift that we're seeing in Laura Jane Grace as a singer and a songwriter over the course of Against Me 2002 to Against Me 2016 is like super gradual and even minimal in comparison to Tim Pool going from Against Me stan who knows all the songs on the guitar to Russian oligarch paid right-wing talking head freak who releases some of the worst music known to man under the title of his podcast. Tell me what to do instead of dreaming. Let me die for you if I... And at the very least, I can...
Yeah, every fucking right-wing grifter is a goddamn failed artist, dude. Oh my God.
And respect the fact that Laura Jane Grace in her own art and work has actually like tried to explain and contend with these changes that she's had ideologically over the course of her lifetime in her music, actually presenting them to her fans to try to give them some sort of understanding. Meanwhile, Tim Pool over here is a million times more the sellout than Laura Jane Grace could ever be. And he gets to sit there on his shady billionaire funded podcast YouTube channel and pretends like he's not the textbook definition of a political internet grifter.
Ukraine is the enemy of this country. Ukraine.
This is infinitely better content than his music. Can we all agree? Him doing the Ukraine is the enemy of mankind shit was like, that was Kino. You know what I mean? That in and of itself was like way better content than anything else he's ever produced before or after. This is the best Tim Pool clip with the weak ass fisting of the table.
Is our enemy, being funded by the Democrats. I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation right now is Ukraine.
But yeah, wow, you really got to give it to Tim Pool for uncovering the Laura Jane Grace billionaire trans woman grift. Because as we all know, all rock singers, all punk rock bands, if they want to become famous and want to become millionaires and just sort of like, you know, get really big and get really huge and see tons of success, but only for a little bit though, only for a little bit, they all have to become trans. But yeah, there you go. Tim Pool exposed once again as a dimwit, and I think I'm going to leave it there. Over here next to my head is another video you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel.